and then the finger pulled back on the trigger. Jimmy knew the workings of a gun. The .25 slide was already racked, cartridge in the chamber. The trigger spring engaged the firing pin. The firing pin hit the primer. The primer ignited the gunpowder. The bullet flew from the chamber. The casing popped out of the ejection port. Don's head exploded. Jimmy's memory did no work to raise the image. The violence was etched into his corneas, backdropped every time he blinked. Jimmy was looking at Don, then he was looking at the gun, then he was looking at how the side of Don's face had distorted into the color and texture of a rotten piece of fruit. Click, click. The gun had jammed. Otherwise, Jimmy wouldn't be running down the street right now. He would be face down in an alley beside Don. Condoms and cigarette butts and needles sticking to their skin. Gilmer Street, Cortlandt, Piedmont, 3 more blocks. His knee could hold out for 3 more blocks. Jimmy had never been on the business end of a firing gun. The flash was an explosion of starlight, millions of pinpricked pieces of sun lighting up the dark alley. His eardrums rang with the sound. His eyes stung from the cordite. At the same time, he felt the splash against his skin, like hot water, only he knew. It was blood and bone, and pieces of flesh hitting his chest, his neck, his face. He tasted it on his tongue, crunched the bone between his teeth. Don Wesley's blood. Don Wesley's bone. He was blinded by it. When Jimmy was a kid, his mother used to make him take his sister to the pool. She was so little back then, her skinny, pale legs and arms, poking out of her tiny suit, reminded Jimmy of a baby praying mantis. In the water, he'd cup his hands together, tell her he'd caught a bug. She was a girl, but she loved looking at bugs. She'd paddle over to see, and Jimmy would squeeze his hands together so the water would squirt into her face. She would scream and scream. Sometimes she would cry, but he'd still do it again the next time they were in the pool. Jimmy told himself it was all right because she kept falling for it. The problem wasn't that he was cruel. The problem was that she was stupid. Where was she now? Safe in bed, he hoped. Fast asleep, he prayed. She was on the job too. His little sister, it wasn't safe. Jimmy could end up carrying her through the streets one day. He could be jostling her limp body, careening around the corner, his knee brushing the blacktop as the torn ligaments clashed like cymbals. Jimmy saw a glowing sign up ahead, a white field with a red cross in the center. Grady Hospital. He wanted to weep. He wanted to fall to the ground. But his burden would not lighten. If anything, Don got heavier. The last 20 yards were the hardest of Jimmy's life. A group of black men were congregating under the sign. They were dressed in bright purples and greens. Their tight pants flared below the knee, showing a touch of white patent leather. Thick sideburns, pencil mustaches, gold rings on their fingers. Cadillacs parked a few feet away. The pimps were always in front of the hospital this time of morning. They smoked skinny cigars and watched the sun rise as they waited for their girls to get patched up for the morning rush hour. None of them offered to help the 2 bloody cops making their way toward the doors. They gawked. Their cigarillos stopped midair. Jimmy fell against the glass doors. Someone had forgotten to lock them. They butterflied open. His knee slewed to the side. He fell face first into the emergency